Some of the images and details that will be described in this video may be disturbing to some. However, everything mentioned in this video is true, and sources will be cited in the description below. There are purposefully a lot of advertisements on this video. All revenue generated will be going directly to UNICEF Yemen, which is dedicated to causing change in Yemen. The link to their site is also in the description if you want to donate yourself or you want to see what they're doing. 2020 has not been a normal year, to say the least. A global pandemic has killed hundreds of thousands of people and forced everyone into a state of quarantine.
Declaring a national emergency.
Race riots have erupted across the world over wrongful victims of police brutality.
I can't breathe! I can't breathe! I can't breathe!
And now, Yemen is facing the largest humanitarian crisis ever in the history of the world.
Millions of children in Yemen could be pushed to the brink of starvation unless international aid is dramatically stepped up.
Yemen has been torn by violent unrest for the past several years, and now COVID-19 has essentially shattered the remaining infrastructure, leaving millions without food, water, and shelter. 12.3 million children are in desperate need of aid, and upwards of 18 million could die this year if massive contributions of financial aid are not given. Most of Yemen had been surviving on financial aid by global organizations like UNICEF, but because of the pandemic, most of this has been tragically halted. More than 1.7 million children have been forced to flee their home. Tens of thousands of children are being armed as soldiers in the war, as unrest only continues to grow. With an extreme lack of medical supply, diseases are even more common. COVID and cholera are devastating the malnourished population of children. 9 million people die of starvation every year in the world, one of the leading causes of death. This year alone, 18 million children will die of starvation from just Yemen if action is not taken. The situation has become so dire, the only food most villages can make is an acidic stew of leaves. Yemen's children and families need desperate access to shelter, food, water, and medical supplies just to keep the country alive for a little longer. But most importantly, this violent conflict that has plagued the country for the last 5 years needs to end as well. In this video, we'll be covering the events leading up to the military conflict in Yemen, and why it is occurring, the current state of Yemen, and what you can do as a viewer to help on top of donating.
So let's start with the geography and climate of Yemen and then move on to the history of the area. The area within Yemen essentially is broken into 5 main geographical regions. The coastal plain on the west, which borders the Red Sea that runs north to south, the Western Highlands, the Central Mountains, the Eastern Highlands, and the desert regions that run across the northeast and east. For the most part, Yemen is a very arid place, being that it is pretty dry and can support little plant growth. This is due to the fact that a good deal of Yemen gets little to no rainfall at all, although some places such as the highlands do get more precipitation. Due to this, Yemen does not have many major water channels, which made it hard to create any sedentary agriculture-based civilization. However, the few channels that do exist, especially the Hadramaut Valley, did support some sort of vegetation and agriculture, and combined with the proximity to the Red Sea, an important trading route in the ancient world and even today, and the flow of Asiatic goods into this route, a few significant city-states/kingdoms sprung up here and there. The city-states that emerged were actually pretty powerful in the area, as they had access to trade between Africa and South Asia, and they produced very valuable substances called frankincense and myrrh, which are essentially resin extracted from certain trees. However, once the Romans started to dominate the Red Sea, the city-states slowly lost their power and their economy slowly started to deteriorate. Due to this, the city-states could no longer maintain themselves, and sadly, after bad maintenance, messy politics/ruling, and fighting between the local Christians and Jews, the once great city-states came to an end and gave way to the rise of Islam in the area. Although such Islamic figures such as the Caliph Abu Bakr tried to unite the Arabian Peninsula, the area of Yemen became pretty divided. In the 9th century, a sect of Islam known as the Zaydi came to Yemen, and a lot of the culture of the area for the next 1,000 or so years would be influenced by the sect. However, over the millennia, a lot of factions and rulers were competing against each other and against the Zaydis for control of the area, and this division, combined with the colonial control of the area by the Ottomans and the British, served as a catalyst for the Yemeni civil war nearly a millennia later.
In the 1500s, the Ottomans expanded into what would become Yemen in order to control the emerging coffee trade there. However, when the cultivation of coffee became more productive elsewhere, the region became useless to the Ottomans, who abandoned the province, leading to its recapture by native Yemenis. Centuries later, in 1839, the British seized control of the port city of Aden in order to protect their communications with India, as well as the entrance to the Red Sea. However, when the Suez Canal was opened in 1869, the Ottomans renewed their interest in controlling Yemen. For decades, the British and Ottomans skirmished over the control of the region, until they eventually decided on a border between the British protectorates in South Yemen and Ottoman North Yemen. When the Ottoman Empire collapsed in 1918, North Yemen became independent under the strict rule of Imam Yahya Muhammad Hamid ad-Din. Although he attempted to modernize and bring prosperity to the region, the policies of Imam Yahya fell out of favor with his subjects, leading to his assassination in 1948. When his son Ahmad bin Yahya came to power in the wake of his death, he refused to reform the oppressive regime of his father. Meanwhile, in South Yemen, tensions between the British and the Yemeni protectorates were increasing. In the 1930s, the British had increased their control over their Yemeni protectorates in response to the dangers presented by the North Yemen regime. Tensions were further amplified in the early 1960s by the creation of the Federation of South Arabia, which forced many different Yemeni states and tribes together in a single British-dominated nation. The simultaneous buildup of anger in North and South Yemen would have heavy consequences for the region in the 1960s and beyond.
On May 22, 1990, the Republic of Yemen declared independence with Saleh as president. President Saleh openly supported Saddam Hussein's invasion of Kuwait in 1990 and refused to join the U.S.-Saudi military coalition against Iraq, which prompted Saudi Arabia to expel hundreds of thousands of Yemeni workers and to cut off all foreign aid to Yemen. Yemen had been dependent on economic aid from Saudi Arabia and other oil-rich countries, but when Saudi Arabia cut ties, most of the other Arab oil states did the same. Saleh and his government made many attempts to strengthen and build political support for Yemen, but the economy collapsed despite a previous period of improved economic conditions. Violence, including assassinations and bombings, on top of an ailing economy, led to another civil war in May of 1994. After the war, food costs rose, the cost of fuel doubled, the value of Yemen's currency decreased, and there was a shortage of water and electricity. In September 1999, the first official presidential election was held, which re-elected President Saleh. From 2000 to 2011, a branch of Al-Qaeda called Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, or AQAP, targeted Yemen and American embassies in Yemen. The United States and other countries in 2004 were pushing President Saleh to concentrate on fighting the AQAP, but Saleh launched a series of battles against northern Yemeni Shia fighters called Houthis. Saleh's justification behind the attacks were accusations of separatism and religious opposition against the Houthis, who responded with complaints of discrimination under Saleh. In 2008, the United States started to train Yemeni counterterrorism forces with armed drones and other weapons, and in 2011, a drone strike killed the AQAP leader Anwar al-Awlaki. AQAP is still a threat today, and the United Arab Emirates use it as justification for having troops in southern Yemen. Also in 2011, Yemen's own Arab Spring started with protests in Sana'a on corruption and the economy. The countries surrounding Yemen used U.S. support and their own finances to pressure President Saleh to stop the protests by resigning. Saleh's vice president, Abdurrabbu Mansour al-Hadi, became president. In 2013, the Yemeni National Dialogue Conference, or NDC, occurred in hopes of bringing Yemen's political and civil groups together to work towards a compromise. The conference was a success and was praised by the international and domestic community, and Hadi was given a term extension to oversee the end of the transitional period. Then, in 2014, clashes between the Houthis and Sunnis decreased the progress of the NDC, and protests were sparked against the government. The Houthis seized this opportunity and allied with former President Saleh to dissolve the NDC and take control of Yemen. Hadi and his cabinet were held hostage by the Houthis, but eventually in February of 2015, they were released and fled to Saudi Arabia. The Houthis were left with control of Yemen, but in March, the Saudi military restored Hadi's government in Sana'a to prevent Houthi raids and airstrikes on the border. Despite this arduous history, the war in Yemen is still not over.
Due to the continuing war, the political situation in Yemen is still in shambles. Houthi rebels continue to take control of Yemen and had control of the vital ocean port in Hudaida. This port gave them access to the Red Sea, and the war was continuing on as the Yemen and Saudi Arabian coalition kept fighting to obtain it for themselves. In 2018, the Stockholm Agreement was signed. The purpose of this document was to create peace in Yemen by forcing the groups in war, such as the Saudi government and the Houthis, to redeploy their forces in Hudaida, establish a prisoner of war exchange system, and to address the violence in Taiz. Though the prisoners are still being released, the redeployment of forces is an ongoing process, and there are still fears about another war starting for Hudaida, a port city which is an economic treasure. In July of 2019, the UAE withdrew its forces as well. Just when things seemed as if they relatively could not get worse, the STC came into the picture. The STC, or the Southern Transitional Council, is a southern separatist movement in Yemen. The STC took control of the city of Aden, which is where the cabinet of Yemen stayed, because of their doubts about Hadi, the ruler of Yemen, and his connections to Islamists. Saudi Arabia offered a power-sharing deal in November of 2019, which made the STC loosen its control in Aden. The UN thought this agreement would help make the political situation better, although the same repeated pattern started again in January of 2020. Sadly, fighting started escalating between the Houthis and the coalition forces. This went from minor fights to full-blown combat on several lines along with missile and airstrikes. To make matters worse, in April of 2020, the STC broke the agreement from earlier with Saudi Arabia and took over the port city of Aden once again. At the same time, Saudi declared a ceasefire due to the coronavirus, but the Houthis declined it, saying they would only do so if they got access to Sana'a and Hudaida. Overall, this continuing war over territory has left a complex political situation and made the social situation even more devastating.
The political climate of Yemen has set the stage for the worst humanitarian crisis in the world. The conflicts have caused families to flee their homes, schools to be closed, and water supplies to be cut short. 4.3 million children are estimated to be in direct danger of being forced to fight in the war. A statement from UNICEF says, as each new month of fighting passes, on average another 50 children die, and more than 90 more are wounded or left with potentially lifelong disabilities. Many more are left with lasting psychological damage. Children as young as 10 years old, both girls and boys, are being forced to fight, patrol checkpoints, or work as guards. These children are killed in combat, injured, and at the very least psychologically traumatized by the war. Those in poverty are even more at risk, as they would be offered cash payments which would help their families survive. Almost half of Yemen's population lives in poverty, meaning that these conditions are realities for millions of Yemeni families. With more and more children out of schools, they lack their social safety net to keep them safe from recruitment. Before COVID-19, almost 2 million children were out of school, but now an additional 5.8 million children no longer have access to an education. Teachers haven't been paid salaries in more than 3 years, and thousands of schools are out of use due to the war. The education cluster estimates that more than 1,000 schools have been damaged, while almost 200 schools are being used as a shelter. Just going to school would be dangerous for children. Going outside in public areas would mean children would have to face remnants of the war, including mines and unexploded bombs. Mojib, a community volunteer in Toban district, says, "Sometimes I still hear children's laughter in the schoolyard. Then I realize that I'm just imagining. There are no more children in this school." Being out of school because of poverty could lead to homelessness, which would put these children at greater risk for discrimination, abuse, trafficking, imprisonment, and especially child marriages. With so many families in poverty, parents are forced to marry off their daughters to older men for a payment. Children face threats from not only direct conflict attacks and poverty, but also malnutrition and diseases. The health system lacks appropriate facilities, staff, and equipment. According to UNICEF, health workers haven't been paid salaries for the past 3 years until 2019. The country's healthcare system now stands on the brink of collapse. Amid this crisis, Yemen lacks vaccinations, medications, food supplies, and clean water. On top of millions of children already suffering, an additional 6,600 children under the age of 5 could die from preventable causes by the end of the year, a staggering increase of 28%. Around 9.58 million children do not have access to safe water, sanitation, or hygiene products. 30,000 children could develop life-threatening severe acute malnutrition over the next 6 months, a direct result of the country's lack of resources. All of these factors have intensified the threat and spread of the COVID-19 virus. Sarah Baisalo Nyanti, UNICEF's representative for the country of Yemen, has spoken out regarding the current state of COVID-19, stating that, "We are trying to prevent the health and water systems from collapsing, and we were holding these pieces together. Now we are on the brink of collapse. COVID could be the tipping point. Right now, 75% of communities cannot afford to buy soap, and if they do have the money, the choice will be to buy something they can eat or medicine." UNICEF is asking for $461 million for aid in combating this humanitarian crisis, with 53 million of those funds going to work against the threat of COVID-19. As of June 26, the COVID appeal is only 10% funded, and the humanitarian appeal is only 39% funded. As funds are being met, Representative Nyanti continues to emphasize the dire condition of the country, explaining that, "If we don't survive this particular strain that we're under now in terms of funding, we will see the health system collapse within the next 6 months." UNICEF has fought tirelessly for the last 5 years to ensure the health and safety of the Yemeni children, and their efforts have only gotten stronger since the COVID-19 outbreak. UNICEF has pledged itself to suppress the transmission of the virus. They are working to spread awareness of its dangers through public service announcements. They are providing vital supplies, including COVID-19 testing kits, to areas in need. And they are working to save lives through deploying healthcare workers and delivering protective equipment and basic hygiene kits. Organizations like UNICEF mirror the urgency that the entire world must feel in combating this crisis. Without swift action, an entire generation of children could lose their lives. An entire country of children. As Yemen Representative Nyanti stated, "The children who are the future of Yemen are dying. 12.3 million children are in need of urgent humanitarian assistance right now. That's the total population of Qatar and the UAE. That's the total population of 2 full countries."
Now, we've covered a lot of information. Hopefully you have become more knowledgeable about the situation in Yemen now than you were at the start of this video. It's great to educate yourself, and even after this video ends, we encourage you to continue educating yourself. One way you could do this is to just research the topic. The internet has so much information, you just need to make sure that you use credible sources to educate yourself. One of these is UNICEF, the United Nations Children Emergency Fund. If you visit the organization's website, you can find lots of statistics and factual information about the crisis in Yemen. Obviously, educating yourself is great, but taking action is even better. After educating yourself, it's time to start thinking about ways you can take action. You might be asking yourself, how can I take action? Action can come in a variety of ways. One of these is raising awareness. Although it doesn't have a direct impact on the crisis in Yemen, it ensures those around you are also educated. The more people educated, the more people who are willing to take action. One way you could raise awareness is by simply having discussions with family and friends around you, informing them about the problem in Yemen and how it arose in the first place. You could even show them this video. Education is the first step to change. You won't be as effective at helping a certain cause unless you are educated on the cause. Another way you can raise awareness, if you live in the US, is by emailing local and national representatives demanding the US end military support for the Saudi-led coalition and resume humanitarian aid to Yemen. The best people to contact are your senators and congressional representatives. To find your senators, visit www.senate.gov/senators/contact. To find your congressional representatives, visit www.house.gov/representatives/findyourrepresentative. If you have social media like YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, etc., Post resources and information so people can educate themselves and be aware of the humanitarian crisis. The next step you can do to take action is to sign petitions. There are links to several petitions you can sign in the description of this video. One link, yemencrisis.card.co, has several petitions, videos you can watch that will donate money, a call script for you when contacting representatives, and more information to further educate yourself. Finally, you can take action by donating money to credible organizations. The best organization to donate to would be UNICEF. They are one of the leading organizations dealing with the crisis in Yemen right now. In fact, all of the ad revenue accumulated from this video will go directly to UNICEF humanitarian aid in Yemen. You can go to UNICEF's website and click Donate, the red button on the top right corner of the website. In the description is the link to donate directly to the Yemen crisis through UNICEF. Other organizations you can donate to are the International Committee of the Red Cross, or the ICRC, Doctors Without Borders, and the World Food Programs, or WPF. In fact, you can even download an app called Free Rice from the App Store on your phone. All the ad revenue on that game goes directly to the WPF to provide aid in Yemen. Below in the description are the links to the organizations. Please share this video and encourage people to watch it, as we want to raise the most money we can for the Yemen crisis. Additionally, make sure to like and comment on this video. Now, you have a lot of resources and information at your disposal. The ability to promote change and make an impact on the world is in your hands.